The alarm screamed through every corridor of Sanctuary Station. Commander Taman ran toward the bridge, his boots pounding against metal floors that shook with each enemy impact. Around him, crew members rushed to their stations, fear written across their faces. They all knew what was coming. They had known for days. The Vryn fleet had arrived 3 hours ago. 200 warships, each one larger and more powerful than anything humanity could build. They surrounded the station like predators circling wounded prey. Taman had sent distress calls to every human colony within range. No one was coming. No one could come. Humanity's military was scattered, weak and outdated. Sanctuary Station stood alone. He reached the bridge and took his command chair. The main view screen showed the horror outside. Vryn ships filled the void of space, their dark hulls reflecting the light of distant stars. They were beautiful in a terrible way, designed for one purpose only: destruction. "Status report," Taman ordered. Keeping his voice steady even though his heart raced, Lieutenant Bora turned from her console, her face pale. "Sir, all defensive platforms are destroyed. Our shield generators are at 15%. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. We've lost contact with Engineering Section 3. Casualties?" Taman asked, though he dreaded the answer. 700 dead. Another 200 wounded. Bora's voice cracked. "Sir, we can't win this." Taman looked at the faces around him. Young faces, most of them. Kids who had joined the military thinking they would protect colonies from pirates or escort trade ships. They never expected to fight a war humanity was losing before it even began. "The civilian transports?" Taman asked. "Last one just entered Quantum Jump," reported Officer Minsak from Navigation. "All refugees are away. They're heading to the inner colonies. Good. That was good. 3,000 civilians saved. That was what mattered." Taman had kept his promise to hold the station long enough for them to escape. Everything else was secondary. A massive explosion rocked the station. Lights flickered. Sparks flew from damaged consoles. Someone screamed. The view screen showed one of their last defense ships breaking apart, torn in half by Vryn weapons fire. There were people on that ship. Taman had known the captain. They had shared drinks just 2 weeks ago, talking about going home someday. "Incoming transmission from the Vryn fleet," Bora announced. "Put it through." The view screen changed. A Vryn commander appeared, his alien features sharp and cold. He had 4 eyes arranged vertically on his elongated face, and his skin was the color of deep ocean water. When he spoke, the translation software made his voice sound mechanical and emotionless. "Human commander, your resistance is meaningless. Surrender your station. We will make your deaths quick." Taman stood from his chair and walked closer to the screen. He looked directly at the alien commander. "I am Commander Taman of the United Human Colonies. This station stands under human protection. If you want it, come and take it." The Vryn commander's features twisted into something that might have been a smile. "Brave words from a dying species, very well. We shall honor your courage with annihilation." The transmission ended. The screen returned to showing the enemy fleet. They were moving closer now, weapons charging. Bright energy built up along their hulls, preparing to fire. Taman turned to his crew. They were all watching him, waiting for orders, waiting for a miracle he couldn't provide. He thought about lying to them, telling them help was coming. "But they deserve truth. Listen carefully," Taman said. "I'm not going to tell you we can win. I'm not going to tell you everything will be fine. But I am going to tell you this. Every second we fight, those civilian ships get farther away. Every shot we fire, every moment we survive, we buy time for 3,000 innocent people to reach safety. That matters. You matter. What we do here today matters." He walked to the weapons console and activated his command codes. Deep in the station's core, the reactor began a sequence that couldn't be stopped. A timer appeared on his personal screen. 10 minutes, sir?" Bora had noticed something in his expression. "What did you just do?" Taman looked at her, then at all of them. "I'm giving everyone a choice. There are still a few escape pods left. Enough for most of you." I activated the reactor overload sequence. In 10 minutes, this station becomes a bomb big enough to take out every Vryn ship within 5 kilometers. Silence filled the bridge. They understood now. This wasn't a last stand. It was a suicide mission. "You have time to reach the pods," Taman continued. "I won't order you to stay. You've done your duty. You've done more than anyone could ask. If you want to live, go now. I'll stay behind and make sure the Vryn stay close enough for the blast." Nobody moved. Taman waited, expecting them to run. He wanted them to run. They were young. They had futures ahead of them. Bora spoke first. Sir, with respect, I'm staying. My family was on one of those civilian transports. I'm not leaving until I know they're safe. I'm staying too, said Minseok. Someone needs to keep the weapons firing. Might as well be me. One by one, every person on the bridge volunteered to stay. Taman felt pride and grief mixing together in his chest. These were good people, the best humanity had to offer, and they were all about to die. Then we make these last minutes count, Taman said. All weapons, continuous fire. Target their command ships. Make them remember this day. The station's remaining weapons came alive. Missiles launched. Energy beams cut through space. The crew fought with everything they had, pouring centuries of human warfare into these final moments. They damaged 3 Vryn ships, destroyed 2 smaller ones. It wasn't enough to matter strategically, but it made them feel less helpless. The Vryn returned fire. The station shuddered under the impact. More hull breaches. More explosions. The lights went dark except for emergency systems. The view screen cracked but kept working. 7 minutes left. Taman sat at his console and began recording a message. His hands were steady now. Peace had settled over him. He typed in coordinates, security codes, ancient authorization sequences he had memorized years ago, but never thought he would use. Protocol Omega, he said into the recorder. Authorization Taman 97 Alpha. This is Commander Taman, last commanding officer of Sanctuary Station. The outer colonies have fallen. The fleets are destroyed. Humanity faces extinction. I hereby activate Protocol Omega under the terms established in the year 2247. Let those who sleep be awakened. Let the Guardians rise. The last human defender falls, but humanity must survive. He encrypted the message with codes older than his grandfather and aimed it toward Earth, toward the solar system where humanity was born. The message would take weeks to arrive, but it would arrive. And then if the old stories were true, if the legends weren't just legends, everything would change. 5 minutes left. The Vryn fleet was closing in, preparing for a final assault. They wanted to board the station, claim it as a trophy. Taman smiled. Let them come closer. Just a little closer. He looked at his crew one last time. They were working even as the station fell apart around them. Bora was crying but kept firing weapons. Minseok was humming an old Earth song. Others were holding hands, facing death together. It's been an honor serving with you, Taman said. They looked at him. Someone saluted. Others smiled. Bora whispered, See you on the other side, Commander. 2 minutes left. The Vryn ships were right on top of them now. Perfect position. Taman could see their hulls through the cracked view screen, close enough to make out details. They thought they had won. He reached for the manual detonation switch. His hand hovered over it. 1 minute left on the timer, but he wanted to choose the exact moment. Wanted to see their faces when they realized their mistake. The Vryn commander appeared on screen again, triumphant. Your resistance ends now, human. Prepare for board. Taman pressed the button. For humanity, he whispered. The reactor core exploded with the force of a small star. The blast wave tore through Sanctuary Station instantly, then expanded outward at impossible speed. It caught 40 Vryn ships before they could react, vaporizing them. 20 more were damaged beyond repair. The explosion lit up the sector like a brief, violent sun. In the aftermath, debris floated in the void. Twisted metal from the station mixed with fragments of Vryn warships. The remaining enemy fleet hung motionless, shocked by the sudden violence. On the Vryn flagship, Commander Thorol stared at the destruction. He had lost 60 ships to 1 desperate human, but the human fleet was gone now. Their colonies were defenseless. Their homeworld was weak. This was a victory, even if it cost more than expected. Continue the advance, Thorol ordered. Humanity is finished as a military power. Begin preparations for the invasion of their core worlds. The Vryn fleet moved forward, leaving the destruction behind. They were confident. They were powerful. They were conquerors who had defeated countless species across the galaxy. They had no idea what was waking up. Far away on Earth, deep beneath the Bayekdu Mountains, in a facility that had been sealed for 600 years, ancient machinery began to move. Vault doors designed to last forever started their unlocking sequence. Computer systems older than any living human flickered to life. And in thousands of cryogenic pods, preserved bodies began to thaw. Major Jiwan opened her eyes for the first time in 600 years. The world was blurry at first, just shapes and lights without meaning. Her body felt heavy, wrong, like it belonged to someone else. Pain shot through every nerve as her system fought to restart itself after centuries of frozen sleep. She tried to move her fingers. They twitched. Good, that was good. Sensation was returning. The medical nanites in her bloodstream were doing their job, repairing tissue damage from the long sleep. She could feel them working, tiny machines swimming through her veins, fixing what had broken during the endless cold. Around her, other pods were opening. She heard the hiss of releasing pressure, the mechanical sounds of ancient technology functioning perfectly despite its age. Lights came on throughout the massive chamber, revealing row after row of cryogenic pods stretching into darkness. Thousands of them, all opening, all releasing their sleeping occupants. Jiwan sat up slowly. Her enhanced muscles responded better than normal human muscles would have. Even after 6 centuries, even weakened by cryosleep, she was stronger and faster than any ordinary person. The genetic modifications and cybernetic implants that made her what she was had survived the long sleep intact. She looked down at her hands. The skin was pale from lack of sunlight, but underneath she could see the faint lines where synthetic fibers wove through her muscle tissue. Her bones contained metal alloys that made them nearly unbreakable. Her eyes had been replaced with advanced cybernetics that could see across multiple spectrums. She was more machine than human in many ways, though she still felt human where it mattered, in her heart. In her mind, a man stumbled from the pod next to hers. Captain Minho. She recognized him immediately, even though 600 years had passed since she last saw his face. He looked exactly the same. The cryosleep had preserved them all perfectly. He coughed, spitting out preservation fluid, and looked around in confusion. Jiwan? His voice was rough, unused. Where are we? What happened? We're home, Minho. We're in the facility. Jiwan climbed out of her pod, her legs shaky but growing stronger with each second. Something activated Protocol Omega. We've been awakened. All around them, more soldiers were waking up. Sergeant Hieri emerged from her pod looking angry, which was normal for her. Lieutenant Daehyun was helping others who were having trouble adjusting. Thousands of enhanced soldiers, humanity's greatest weapons, were returning to consciousness after centuries of forced sleep. Jiwan walked to the central command console. Her fingers moved across the controls automatically, muscle memory from another lifetime guiding her actions. The screens came to life, showing information that made her heart sink. This can't be right, she whispered. Minho joined her at the console, reading over her shoulder. His face went pale. 600 years? We've been asleep for 600 years? Jiwan nodded, scrolling through the data. The facility's computers had been monitoring the outside world all this time, recording everything. She accessed news feeds, military reports, historical records. The story they told was one of slow decline. After the first contact war ended in 2250, humanity had celebrated. They had defeated an alien invasion that nearly destroyed them. The Omega program soldiers, the enhanced warriors who won that war, were heroes. For about 10 years then the fear started. Politicians began asking questions. These super soldiers were too powerful, too dangerous. What if they decided they didn't want to take orders anymore? What if they turned against humanity? The soldiers had been created to fight aliens, but now that the war was over, what purpose did they serve? The solution was elegant and cruel. Honor them with eternal vigilance. Put them in cryosleep with the promise that they would be awakened only if humanity faced extinction again. Make them heroes in the history books while safely locking them away where they couldn't be a threat. Jiwan read the actual order from 2253. It was signed by people she had once protected, people she thought were friends. The betrayal hurt even after 6 centuries. They were afraid of us, Hieri said, reading another console. The history files are very clear about that. They called us necessary evils, monsters that were useful during the war but had no place in peacetime. Daehyun pulled up educational materials from various decades. The Omega program was mentioned less and less as centuries passed. By 2600, they were barely a footnote in history books. Some texts questioned whether they even existed, or were just propaganda from the war era. They erased us, Minho said quietly. They let people forget we were even real. Jiwan felt anger building inside her, hot and terrible. They had volunteered for the Omega program. They had let scientists alter their bodies, replace parts of them with machines, rewrite their genetic code. They had done it to protect humanity, They had fought and bled and watched friends die. And for what? To be forgotten? To be labeled as monsters? She took a deep breath, forcing the anger down. Emotions were dangerous for enhanced soldiers. Their bodies could amplify feelings into something destructive. She needed to stay calm, think clearly. "Show me why we were awakened," she ordered the computer. The screen changed, showing recent military reports. The Vryn Collective had been expanding into human space for 5 years. They had conquered outer colonies, destroyed defense fleets, and were now pushing toward the core worlds. Humanity was losing badly. The final message came from Commander Taman at Sanctuary Station, just before he died. Jiwan watched the recording. Taman looked tired but determined. He explained the situation calmly, listing all the colonies that had fallen, all the battles that were lost. He finished with the Protocol Omega activation codes and a simple statement. "Humanity needs you again. I'm sorry we failed. I'm sorry you have to wake up to this. But please save them, save us. We don't deserve it, but please." The recording ended. The command center was silent except for the sound of thousands of soldiers breathing. They had all gathered now. All 47,000 who survived the cryosleep process. They stood in formation without being ordered to, old military discipline asserting itself automatically. Jiwan looked at them. These were the people she had fought alongside 600 years ago. They had trusted her then. They trusted her now. She was their commanding officer, and they waited for her decision. "We could go back to sleep," she said, her voice carrying across the massive chamber. "We owe nothing to people who erased us from history, who called us monsters, who locked us away because they feared what they created." Heads nodded. She could see the anger on their faces, the same anger she felt. "We could walk away," Jiwan continued. "Let humanity face the consequences of their choices. Let them fight their own battles with their own strength." More nods. "It would be justified. Fair even, but we won't," Jiwan said firmly. "Because we remember something they forgot. We remember what it means to be human. Not the genetic code or the biology. The choice. The decision to protect those weaker than ourselves even when they don't deserve it. Even when they fear us. Even when they hate us." She walked among them now, looking into enhanced eyes that glowed with cybernetic implants. "They forgot us, but we remember them. We remember protecting colonies full of children who smiled at us. We remember defending planets where people lived and loved and built futures. Those people are still out there. Different people, yes. People who don't know we exist. But they're still human, still worth protecting." Hieri stepped forward. "What are your orders, Major?" Jiwan returned to the command console and pulled up current military data. The Vryn fleet was massive, but she had fought worse odds before. The facility contained mothballed warships from the First Contact War era. Older technology, but built during a time when humanity fought for survival. "They would be enough. We mobilize everything," Jiwan ordered. "All ships, all weapons, all equipment. Hieri, I want combat teams organized within 6 hours. Daehyun, get our pilots trained on the old ships. Minyo, you're with me on tactical planning." The soldiers moved with frightening efficiency. This was what they were made for. What they were trained for. 600 years of sleep vanished as if it had never happened. They were warriors again, and they had a war to fight. Jiwan spent the next 12 hours reviewing intelligence data and formulating strategy. The Vryn Collective was powerful, but they had patterns, weaknesses. She could see them clearly with her enhanced analytical capabilities. Her brain, modified to process tactical information at superhuman speeds, mapped out scenarios and probabilities. Minho joined her with status reports. "All ships are operational. Crews are assigned. Weapon systems are charging. We can launch in 18 hours. Make it 12, Jiwan said. The Vryn are moving on New Terra. If we don't reach them in time, billions die." Minho nodded and left to relay the orders. Jiwan sat back in her chair, feeling the weight of command settling on her shoulders again. It felt familiar, comfortable even. She had been a soldier for so long that peace had never quite fit right. Hieri approached with a tablet. "Major, I've been reading about modern human military doctrine. It's very different from our era. They prioritize minimizing casualties, following rules of engagement, limiting collateral damage. Good principles," Jiwan said. "We don't fight that way," Hieri pointed out. "We fight to win. Whatever it..." New Terra burned beneath a sky filled with enemy ships. The planet that served as humanity's capital for 300 years was dying, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Defense platforms hung in orbit as lifeless wreckage. Human warships fled or exploded under Vryn weapons fire. On the ground, billions of people huddled in shelters praying for a miracle that wasn't coming. Commander Thorol stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the destruction with satisfaction. This world would fall within hours. After that, the rest of human space would collapse like houses made of paper. Humanity had proven to be weak, their technology outdated, their warriors cowardly. This would be an easy conquest. "Sir, detecting quantum space fluctuations," reported his sensor officer. Multiple ships entering the system. Thorol barely glanced at the display. "More refugees fleeing." "Let them run. We'll hunt them down later." "Sir, these aren't refugee ships. They're warships. 30 vessels, unknown configuration. They're not in our database." That got Thorol's attention. He moved to the sensor station and studied the readings. The ships were old, older than any human vessels in current service. But their energy signatures were massive, far beyond what modern human ships produced. Their reactors were running at power levels that should be impossible. "Identify them," Thorol ordered. "Unable to identify, sir. Design patterns suggest human origin, but they predate our records. They're at least 500 to 600 years old based on construction techniques." Ancient human ships? That made no sense. Thorol accessed the tactical display. The 30 vessels were arranging themselves in attack formation between his fleet and New Terra. They were outnumbered 15 to 1. Either they were insane or they knew something he didn't. "Open communication channel," Thorol commanded. A human woman appeared on the view screen. Thorol's first thought was that she looked wrong. Her eyes glowed with internal light, obviously cybernetic. Her movements were too smooth, too precise. When she spoke, her voice had a quality that made his scales itch with instinctive warning. "Vryn Fleet, this is Major G1 of the Omega program. You are in human territory. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed." Thorol laughed. He couldn't help it. 30 ships against his 400, and this human was issuing threats? "I am Commander Thorol of the Vryn Collective. Your pathetic fleet will be debris within the hour. Surrender now and I promise quick deaths." The human woman smiled, and something about that smile made Thorol's confidence waver. "You were warned," she said simply, then cut the transmission. "All ships prepare for combat," Thorol ordered. "Target the lead vessels. Show these primitives what real firepower looks like." His fleet opened fire. Hundreds of energy beams and missiles crossed the void. Enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. The human ships moved. They moved impossibly fast, their acceleration crushing what should have killed any crew through sheer force. Ships banked and rolled in patterns that defied physics, dodging attacks that should have been unavoidable. "What are their crews?" Thorol demanded. "How are they surviving those maneuvers?" "Unknown, sir. But their shields are holding. Those energy readings, they're off the scale. Their defensive systems are far beyond modern human technology." The human ships returned fire. When they did, Thorol understood why they seemed so confident. Their weapons were from an era when humanity fought for survival, when they built things to kill rather than to look impressive. Energy beams cut through Vryn shields like they weren't there. Missiles tracked with perfect accuracy, finding weaknesses in armor plating. Railguns fired projectiles at relativistic speeds that punched through hulls and kept going, destroying 3 ships with single shots. In the first 30 seconds of combat, Thorol lost 12 ships, all vessels evasive maneuvers. "Return fire! Kill them!" The battle became chaos. The human ships fought with a coordination that seemed impossible. They moved as one organism, covering each other's weaknesses, exploiting every opening. When Vryn ships tried to surround them, they scattered, then reformed in new positions before the enemy could adjust. On G1's ship, the bridge was calm despite the violence outside. Enhanced soldiers worked their stations with mechanical precision, their cybernetic implants allowing them to process information faster than any normal human. G1 stood at the center, her mind linked to the tactical network, seeing the battle from 100 perspectives simultaneously. "Target the command ships," she ordered. "I want their coordination disrupted. Minho, take your squadron and hit their flank. Hayuri, prepare boarding teams. When I give the signal, I want you on that flagship." The orders flowed smoothly. Her soldiers responded instantly, no hesitation, no doubt. This was what they were made for, what they had trained for across countless battles 600 years ago. The enemy was different, but war remained the same. Minho's squadron broke formation and accelerated toward the Vryn flank. 5 ships moving at speeds that would liquefy normal humans. Inside, enhanced soldiers sat calmly, their reinforced bodies handling forces that would have killed them before the modifications. Minho watched the tactical display, calculating angles and velocities with his modified brain, seeing patterns in the chaos. "Fire," he said quietly. His squadron unleashed everything at once. The concentrated firepower hit a cluster of Vryn ships that were trying to regroup. Explosions blossomed in the void, silent and beautiful and deadly. 15 enemy ships vanished in an instant. Thoril watched his fleet dying and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: fear. These humans weren't just skilled. They were something else entirely. Something beyond normal. His sensor data showed life signs from their ships that made no biological sense. Heart rates far below normal, body temperatures running cold, neural activity patterns that looked more like computers than organic brains. "What are they?" he whispered. His science officer pulled up old data, archived information from the First Contact War 600 years ago. "Sir, there are references here to something called the Omega Program. Enhanced soldiers, humans who volunteered for extreme genetic modification and cybernetic augmentation. According to these files, they were considered the most dangerous warriors the galaxy had ever seen. Why weren't we warned about them? Sir, these files indicate they were all put into cryogenic storage after the war ended. They were supposed to be sealed away forever. Most historians consider them myths or propaganda." Thoril stared at the view screen, watching his ships explode one after another. "They're not myths. Signal all vessels. Full retreat now." But it was too late. Jiwan had predicted the retreat order and positioned her ships to cut off escape routes. The Vryn fleet found itself trapped, caught between human ships that fought like demons and a planet they could no longer threaten. "Yeri, go," Jiwan commanded. Boarding pods launched from one of the Omega ships. They crossed space at incredible speed, armed with breaching charges and filled with enhanced soldiers wearing powered armor. The pods slammed into Vryn ships' hulls, cutting through armor and disgorging their deadly cargo. Yeri led her team through the breached hull of a Vryn cruiser. Inside, enemy soldiers waited with weapons ready. They opened fire, but the enhanced humans moved too fast. Yeri dodged plasma bolts that should have been impossible to see coming, her cybernetic eyes tracking the weapon's aim and predicting where they would fire. She closed the distance in seconds. Her powered armor made her strong enough to tear through bulkheads. She grabbed a Vryn soldier and threw him through a wall. Another enemy rushed her with a blade. She caught it with her armored hand, broke it, and put her fist through his chest plate. The Vryn learned quickly that fighting Omega soldiers in close quarters was suicide. But they had nowhere to run. Hieri's team moved through the ship like a surgical strike, targeting critical systems. Within minutes, they reached the engineering section and planted charges. "Objective complete," Hieri reported. "Extracting now." The team evacuated as the charges detonated. The Vryn cruiser's reactor went critical, exploding and taking 2 nearby ships with it. Hieri and her soldiers returned to their pods, already targeting the next vessel. The battle lasted 2 hours. When it ended, 80 Vryn ships were destroyed or disabled. The rest fled in disorder, their formation broken, their confidence shattered. Thoril's flagship limped away, heavily damaged, while he tried to process what had happened. He had lost 80 ships to 30, against an enemy that should have been extinct. On New Terra, Captain Unji watched from the command center of the Planetary Defense Headquarters. She had been coordinating the evacuation of civilians when the unknown ships arrived. Now she stared at her displays, unable to believe what she was seeing. Human ships had just defeated a Vryn fleet 4 times their size. That was impossible. Modern human military doctrine said you needed at least 3-to-1 superiority to have a chance against the Vryn. These ships had been outnumbered and still won decisively. "Get me a communication channel to the lead ship," Yunji ordered. Her communications officer worked for a moment, then nodded. "Channel open, Captain." A woman's face appeared on the screen. Yunji recognized the signs of extreme enhancement immediately. Glowing eyes, unnaturally smooth skin that suggested synthetic components, movements too precise to be entirely biological. President Sang-hoon stood before the Council of Colonies, trying to explain something he barely understood himself. Behind him, holographic displays showed the battle at New Terra, playing on repeat for the assembled representatives. 30 unknown ships destroying 80 Vrin vessels. Enhanced humans fighting with capabilities that should be illegal under a dozen different treaties. These soldiers claim to be from the Omega program, Sang-hoon said, his voice tired. According to classified historical records, they were created during the First Contact War and placed in cryogenic storage in 2253. They were awakened 3 days ago by Protocol Omega, a failsafe designed to activate only in cases of species extinction. Representative Youngmi from the outer colonies stood up, her face red with anger. Mr. President, we have laws against human enhancement of this type. Strict laws. These soldiers are violations of the Geneva Conventions, the Kyoto Accords, and the Treaty of New Earth. They shouldn't exist. And yet they do, Sang-hoon replied. And they just saved New Terra from destruction. Another representative, Hajun from the inner worlds, raised his hand. Have we verified their identity? How do we know they're actually from the Omega program and not some illegal enhancement project? DNA records match historical files, explained Defense Minister Somin. Genetic signatures, cybernetic serial numbers, even dental records. They're exactly who they claim to be. 600-year-old super soldiers preserved perfectly. The council chamber erupted in arguments. Some representatives called the Omega soldiers heroes. Others demanded they be arrested for existing. A few suggested they return to cryosleep immediately. The debate raged for hours while Sang-hoon listened, knowing he would ultimately have to make a decision no one would be happy with. That evening, he met with Major Ji-won in his private office. Security had wanted to be present, worried about what an enhanced soldier might do. Sang-hoon had insisted on meeting alone. If Ji-won wanted to kill him, a dozen guards wouldn't stop her anyway. She sat across from his desk, looking uncomfortable in the formal setting. Her glowing eyes scanned the room constantly, probably analyzing everything with enhanced vision. Up close, Sang-hoon could see where synthetic materials had been woven into her skin, giving it an almost metallic sheen. She was beautiful in a strange, otherworldly way that made him deeply uneasy. Thank you for meeting with me. Major, Sang-hoon began, you're welcome. Mr. President. Her voice was calm, controlled. Though I suspect this isn't a social visit, Sang-hoon decided to be direct. The council wants you gone. Not all of them, but enough. They're scared of what you represent. Power without oversight. Enhancement without limits. Soldiers who could overthrow governments if they wanted to. Ji-won's expression didn't change. Do you agree with them? Honestly, you terrify me. All of you do. I've seen the classified files from the First Contact War. I know what your soldiers are capable of. Cities leveled. Ships destroyed from the inside. Enemy commanders assassinated in their own command centers. You fought that war with a brutality that modern humans find disturbing. It was necessary, Ji-won said quietly. The enemy we faced then showed no mercy. If we had fought with mercy, humanity would have been extinct. I believe you. But that war ended 600 years ago. We've changed since then. We have rules now, ethics committees, international laws about warfare. We try to minimize casualties, protect civilians, follow codes of conduct. Ji-won leaned forward slightly. And how has that worked against the Vrin? Sang-hoon said nothing. She had made her point. Modern human military doctrine, with all its rules and ethics, had been completely ineffective against the Vrin collective. Colonies had fallen. Fleets had been destroyed. Billions had died. Only the Omega soldiers had managed to actually win. I'm not saying your way is wrong, Ji-won continued. Peace is better than war. Rules are better than chaos. But sometimes when you're facing extinction, you need soldiers who will do whatever it takes to win. That's what we are. That's what we were created for. And after the war? Sang-hoon asked. What happens when the Vrin are defeated and you're still here? Still enhanced, still powerful? What's to stop you from deciding you should be in charge? Ji-won smiled sadly. We've been through this before, Mr. President. 600 years ago, people asked the same questions. The answer is the same now as it was then. We're soldiers, not politicians. We fight, we protect. We don't rule. When the war ends, we'll go back to sleep. That's the deal we made, and we'll honor it. Can I trust that? You don't have much choice. But yes, you can trust it. We didn't ask to be awakened. We didn't want this. But now that we're here, we'll do our duty. Then we'll disappear again. Sang-hoon studied her face, looking for deception. He saw only tired honesty. This woman had been a soldier, for longer than his entire civilization had existed in its current form. She had seen humanity at its worst and still chose to protect it. Maybe that was worth trusting. What do you need from us? Sang-hoon asked. Intelligence on Vryn fleet movements, access to supply depots for fuel and ammunition, and for your modern military to stay out of our way. We fight differently than you do. If your ships try to coordinate with us, people will die from the confusion. That's all. That's all. We're not asking for payment, recognition, or political power. We just want to do our job. Sang-hoon made his decision. You'll have what you need. I'll issue the orders tonight. The council won't be happy, but they'll accept it. As for what happens after the war, we can discuss that when the time comes. Ji-won stood to leave, then paused. Mr. President, if I may ask, what do your history books say about us? About the Omega program? Sang-hoon hesitated, then decided she deserved honesty. Most books barely mention you. A few paragraphs about enhanced soldiers who helped win the First Contact War. Some historians question whether you were real or just propaganda. The classified files are more detailed but not available to the public. They erased us. They were afraid of you. Maybe they still are. Ji-won nodded slowly. Better to be feared than forgotten, I suppose. Thank you for your honesty, Mr. President. She left, and Sang-hoon sat alone with his thoughts. He had just made a deal with soldiers who could probably conquer human space if they wanted to. He hoped he wouldn't regret it. 2 weeks later, the Vryn launched their largest offensive yet. Supreme Commander Vraktos arrived with the main battle fleet, 2,000 ships strong. He had analyzed the defeat at New Terra and concluded that the human super soldiers could be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. He was wrong. Ji-won's tactical brilliance turned the Vryn's size into a weakness. She spread her forces across 15 systems, hitting supply lines and communication relays. Without supplies, the massive Vryn fleet began to slow down. Without communication, their coordination fell apart. Hyeri led a team that infiltrated a Vryn command station and captured it intact. The intelligence they recovered gave Ji-won detailed information about Vryn strategy, fleet deployments, and even political tensions within the collective itself. Minho's squadron executed a fighting retreat through the Nebula sector, luring 300 Vryn ships into a trap. The Nebula was full of mines that the Omega soldiers had placed weeks earlier. When the mines detonated, the Nebula lit up like a supernova, destroying enemy ships by the dozens. Daehyun coordinated planetary defenses on colony worlds, training local militias and setting up defensive positions. His enhanced soldiers could hold ground that would have required 10 times as many normal troops. When the Vryn landed ground forces, they found themselves facing enemies who could see in the dark, move faster than their targeting systems could track, and fight for days without rest. The war that the Vryn expected to win in weeks dragged on for 3 months. Every day brought new losses for the collective. Their ships were destroyed faster than they could build replacements. Their soldiers refused to fight enemies they called the Ghost Warriors, human soldiers who seemed impossible to kill. On New Terra, Captain Yoonji watched the war progress with mixed feelings. The Omega soldiers were winning, no question about that. But their methods made her uncomfortable. They fought with a ruthlessness that modern military training specifically avoided. When they captured enemy ships, they showed no mercy to crews who resisted. When they defended colonies, collateral damage was considered acceptable if it achieved objectives. She reviewed combat footage from a battle in the Outer Rim. An Omega soldier, surrounded by 20 Vryn troops, had systematically killed all of them in less than 30 seconds. The efficiency was impressive. The brutality was disturbing. They fight like machines, her second officer observed, watching the same footage. They're part machine, Yoonji replied. But that's not the scary part. The scary part is how good they are at it. They were made for this, created specifically to be perfect soldiers, and perfect soldiers are terrifying. Still, she couldn't deny the results. Colony after colony was saved. Refugee ships reached safety. Vryn fleets retreated or were destroyed. For the first time since the war began, humanity wasn't losing. They were winning. News of the Omega soldiers spread across human space. At first, people didn't believe the stories. Super soldiers from ancient history? It sounded like fantasy. But as more footage emerged, as more witnesses came forward, belief turned to amazement. Supreme Commander Vraktos looked at Earth through the view screen of his flagship and felt nothing but contempt. This small blue world had spawned the species that dared to resist the Vryn collective. It would burn today, and with it, humanity's spirit would break forever. His fleet of 200 ships emerged from quantum space at the edge of the solar system. Sensors immediately detected defensive platforms around Earth, orbital stations, and a small collection of patrol ships. Nothing that could stop him. The super soldiers who had caused so much trouble would be scattered across other systems, protecting colonies. By the time they realized what was happening, Earth would be ash. Begin approach, Vraktos ordered. Prepare orbital bombardment weapons. I want every major city targeted simultaneously. His fleet moved forward, engines blazing. Earth grew larger in the view screen. Vraktos could see the continents, the oceans, the clouds. Soon it would all be fire. Then his sensor officer spoke, his voice uncertain. Sir, detecting energy signatures near Earth, multiple contacts. They were hiding in the moon's shadow. Vraktos felt his confidence crack. How many? 28 ships, sir. Configuration matches the enhanced human vessels. They had been waiting. The super soldiers had predicted his move and prepared a trap. Vraktos wanted to retreat, but pride and desperation kept him moving forward. He still had numerical superiority, 200 against 28. The mathematics favored him. All ships, battle formation, destroy those vessels. On Jaiwan's flagship, alarms sounded as the Vryn fleet approached. She stood calmly on the bridge, watching the tactical display. Around her, enhanced soldiers worked their stations with mechanical precision. They had drilled for this moment, planned every detail. They're taking the bait, Minho reported from his station. Vraktos is committed to the attack. Good, Hyeri, launch boarding teams. Daehyun, take your squadron and hit their rear formations. Minho, you're with me on the flagship assault. Orders flowed smoothly across the neural network that connected all Omega soldiers. They moved as one organism, coordinating perfectly. The Vryn saw 28 ships. They didn't see the 10,000 enhanced soldiers in powered armor floating in space, using stealth technology to remain invisible until the perfect moment. The battle began. Jiwan's ships accelerated toward the Vryn fleet, their weapons firing before they were in optimal range. It looked like desperation, like inferior forces trying anything to survive. Vraktos saw it as confirmation of his victory. The super soldiers were good, but they were only human. They could be overwhelmed. His fleet opened fire, concentrating their weapons on the lead Omega ships. Energy beams and missiles filled the void between Earth and Moon. The first Omega ship's shields failed under the concentrated assault. The second ship took critical damage and began venting atmosphere. See? Vraktos said to his crew. They bleed like anyone else. They die like anyone else. Increase fire. Destroy them all. Then Hyeri's boarding teams activated. 10,000 points of light appeared across the Vryn fleet as enhanced soldiers dropped their stealth and activated their jetpacks. They moved at incredible speed, too small for point defense systems to track effectively. Within seconds, they were cutting through enemy hulls with plasma torches. Chaos erupted. Vryn ships suddenly had enemies inside them. Enhanced soldiers tore through corridors, destroying critical systems, killing crews, setting charges. It was impossible to coordinate a fleet battle when your ships were being sabotaged from within. Hyeri led her team through a Vryn cruiser, her powered armor making her nearly invincible. Enemy soldiers shot at her with plasma weapons. The bolts splashed against her shields, doing minimal damage. She returned fire with a weapon that fired miniature railgun rounds, each shot punching through armor and bodies with equal ease. Engineering section secured, she reported. Setting charges. Her team worked quickly, placing explosives on the reactor core. They had done this dozens of times. It was routine. 30 seconds later, they evacuated through the hull breach they had created. The charges detonated. The cruiser exploded, taking 2 nearby ships with it. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Vryn ships lost power, lost weapons, lost life support. The organized fleet became a confused mass of damaged vessels trying to defend against enemies they couldn't see until it was too late. Vraktos watched his fleet disintegrate. Ship after ship went dark or exploded. His tactical display was a nightmare of red warnings and lost contacts. In 10 minutes, he had lost 40 ships, and the main Omega fleet hadn't even engaged yet. All ships emergency retreat, he ordered. But retreat required coordination, and his fleet had none. Ships tried to flee in different directions, colliding with each other, blocking escape routes. And now Jiwan's vessels were closing in, their weapons tearing through weakened shields and damaged hulls. Minho's squadron hit the rear formation like a hammer. 5 Omega ships against 80 Vryn vessels, and the Vryn were losing. Mino's enhanced tactical mind saw patterns in the chaos, predicted enemy movements before they happened. His ships danced through enemy formations, firing with perfect accuracy, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted effectively. Target their command ships, Minho ordered. Cut off their leadership. His squadron focused fire on vessels with enhanced communication arrays. Command ships exploded one after another. Without leaders giving orders, Vrin formations fell apart completely. Daehyun led ground defense around Earth's orbital stations. Some Vrin ships had launched boarding parties, trying to capture the stations and use them as shields against the Omega soldiers. It was a reasonable strategy against normal humans. Against enhanced soldiers, it was suicide. Daehyun moved through the station corridors in powered armor that made him look like a mechanical demon. Vrin soldiers fired at him from behind barricades. He walked through their fire, his shields absorbing the damage, and returned fire with devastating precision. Every shot hit, every enemy fell. Behind him, his team advanced with the same mechanical efficiency. They cleared the station room by room, giving no quarter, taking no prisoners. This was what they were designed for. Urban combat, close quarters killing. They were perfect at it. On Earth below, billions of people watched the battle through telescopes and satellite feeds. They saw explosions lighting up the darkness of space. They saw their defenders fighting with a skill and ferocity that seemed superhuman because it was superhuman. Children stared in awe. Adults wept with relief. The Omega soldiers were saving them. In the Baekdu Mountains, in the old facility where the Omega soldiers had slept for 600 years, automated systems recorded everything. Battle data, casualty reports, tactical decisions. All of it would be preserved, studied, remembered. Vraktos knew he was beaten. Half his fleet was destroyed or disabled. The super soldiers were everywhere, unstoppable, merciless. He had one choice left. If he couldn't win, he would at least take Earth with him. Set course for Earth, he ordered. Maximum speed. Prepare to ram the planet. His crew looked at him in shock, but they obeyed. The flagship and 20 surviving escorts accelerated toward Earth. If they couldn't conquer it, they would scar it. One flagship hitting the planet at relativistic speed would cause damage equivalent to dozens of nuclear weapons. Jiwon saw the move on her tactical display. He's going for a collision course. Minho Hayeri, intercept that flagship. I'm going in personally. She left the bridge and headed for the boarding pod bay. Around her, soldiers prepared for the assault. They checked weapons, sealed armor, said quick prayers to gods they might not believe in. Jiwon strapped into a boarding pod with 9 other soldiers. Launch, she ordered. The pod shot from her ship like a bullet, accelerating at forces that would have killed normal humans. Jiwon's enhanced body handled it easily. She could feel her heart beating slowly, her breath steady, her mind perfectly calm. This was what she was made for. The pod hit Vraktos' flagship hull and burned through the armor. Jiwon and her team poured into the enemy ship, weapons ready. Vrin soldiers were waiting for them, but it didn't matter. The enhanced humans moved faster, shot straighter, thought quicker. They cut through the defenders like a blade through water. Jiwon led them toward the bridge. She could see the ship's layout in her cybernetic vision, mapped from stolen data and sensor scans. Every turn, every corridor, every obstacle was known before they encountered it. Vrin soldiers tried to stop them with barricades. Jiwon threw grenades that burned through the obstacles. They tried ambushes. Her enhanced senses detected them before the trap was sprung. They tried overwhelming numbers. She killed them faster than they could replace casualties. The bridge door was reinforced, designed to withstand ship weapons. Jiwon planted shaped charges that cut through it like paper. The explosion was deafening. Smoke filled the corridor. Through it, Jiwon walked onto the bridge, her armor scorched but intact. Vraktos stood at the center of the bridge holding a weapon that looked ceremonial. Around him, his crew was dead or dying from the explosion. He aimed the weapon at Jiwon with shaking hands. "Monster," he spat. "You and your kind are abominations. Perversions of nature.